Our United show today, Devil's Advocate. And today, myself and co-host Callum McFadden are joined by a very special guest here today. So we are joined by Dutch football expert James Rowe from Football CFB. And so we are joined by James here
Hello.
today on our first edition of Devil's Advocate. And so I'm just going to go around the table here before we get cracking here today. And first thing, I'm going to come to you, Callum. How are you today after yesterday's game against Arsenal? How are you feeling today? How's the head today?
I'll be honest with you, Keane. I thought Arsenal deserved to win the match, and the only thing I was gutted about is the fact that I need to speak to James on Arsenal duty when his team's just won. I'm sure he'll be very gratuitous in victory today. I doubt it. He deserves to enjoy it. Of course he does. I'm only joking, but yeah, it was poor, and I'm sure we'll get into the nitty gritty very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And James, how are you? How are you today? Like a big win for Arsenal yesterday, their first against a top six team away from home in a long time. Like how's the feeling around the Arsenal camp at the moment? And how are you feeling today?
Personally, I'm very pleased. It's a good win, but it's one building block on the huge job still ahead. In terms of the Arsenal fan base, I personally think people are getting a little bit too carried away. It's a good win. It's 3 points, but it's another step on the ladder. There's still an awful long way to go. I think people forget how long a football season actually is, especially with the commitments of European matches, domestic cups, and that kind of thing. And considering our fixtures coming up, at home to Aston Villa, away to Leeds in particular, which I think is going to be very difficult, and also Wolverhampton and then the derby against Tottenham, it was a well-timed win, but there's still an awful lot of work to be done. And we can be pleased about it. But as I say, it's a long old season. And I know it sounds cliche, but you just have to take it one game at a time in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, look, I suppose before we kind of delve into that game itself, like I suppose for myself, I suppose that for a week that was so high in terms of going out and winning 5-0 against Leipzig in the Champions League, though I was expecting, I suppose, a more positive performance yesterday, and then to see kind of, I suppose, lose kind of the way we did yesterday, and it kind of stung. Like it kind of still stings me now, but look, nevertheless, I'm happy to be here. As always, and always good to chat to you guys though about football. And so I suppose the first topic of the night is Donny Van De Beek, James. Now, yourself obviously covering Dutch football, we spoke in the summer when Donny signed. You came on the show and you're telling us how much of a great addition he was to Manchester United, and those are a very great player that we've been getting. And in the last couple of weeks, like Donny still hasn't, I suppose, has not been given a full chance kind of go get his chance in the Manchester United shirt and show his quality. Like, what is the feeling kind of in Holland at the moment now with the fact that Donny isn't getting a chance to flourish at the moment?
One of disappointment and one of surprise. I said to Callum last week, there's a Dutch football show called Rondo, and they had Ruud Gullit and Marco van Basten on as guests. And Marco van Basten said himself that, particularly for the age that Donny Van De Beek is, it's not good for such a young player not to be playing, especially after having made such a transfer for such a price. Hindsight is such a wonderful thing, but perhaps he should have waited. But for us here in the Netherlands, it's not just surprising the fact of how things have gone. His transfer away from Ajax looked 99.9% certain to be destined for Real Madrid. That's what it looked to be, kind of like the worst kept secret in football. There was rumours of Paris Saint-Germain, but it looked as if it was going to be Real Madrid all the way. And then things changed very quickly. But as I mentioned on your podcast and a couple of podcasts as well, he's got such a great character and he works very much in the interest of the team. He's not a diva. He's not going to go complaining. He's not going to go trying to kick up a stink. He'll try to continue to work hard. But there was a recent interview he did with the Dutch NOS. It's like the Dutch broadcaster, like the Dutch version of BBC, really, in terms of news and reports. And he was saying how well he was looked after. The club really looked after him, where they found accommodation for him and his partner. He was chauffeur driven to the training ground there and back. He felt really comfortable. He could really get on with his colleagues. He felt as if he was doing well. But also, this is a young player who's captained Ajax, is involved in the Dutch national team, has a great attitude in terms of wanting to play football. And you wonder, the longer this goes on, as I say, he's not a diva, but you wonder the longer this goes on, he's going to start to look potentially at what his options are. I mean, I spoke on Callum's on Football CFB on the European Football Show about Davy Klaassen. I'm not trying to compare the two in terms of talent and ability, because obviously Van de Beek is much further on. And Klaassen left, signed for Everton. A new manager come in. He was marginalised, didn't recognise his qualities, and ended up leaving. So even in hindsight, Klaassen said a transfer isn't what it's all cracked up to be. And I think many people have to understand that, but it's not always the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And my personal opinion is that I don't think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer recognises the qualities that he has. And I think a better manager, a more experienced manager, would understand those qualities and let him play. And I just think, looking from an outsider's point of view, Manchester United are the biggest club in England. You know, they're not a charity. They're the biggest football club in England. And, you know, you need to have a manager who's got a certain aura about him. And I just think at the minute, I think the job's too big for Solskjaer. And I think Manchester United have got a big choice ahead of them to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And Callum, like James just alluded to it there, like, you know, he has mentioned that United need kind of a more experienced manager. Now, I suppose I was going to come to you on this point. Like yesterday, we lost 1-0 against Arsenal, and we're now 15th in the league, and we've, you know, one win from for I think the last 4 games. And, you know, look, I suppose that domestically in the league, our form isn't the best. Do you still think Solskjaer is the man for the job? Do you think there's more work to be done? What do you feel about this situation with Ole at the moment? Because he seems to be under a lot of scrutiny.
He's definitely under a lot of scrutiny, and I think whether he's the man for the job long term, only time will tell. It's clearly going to be a tough season for him after the 3rd place finish of last season. But crucially, he will get the time because, as you know, Keane, the Glazer family, Ed Woodward and the board of directors won't make a change until they believe Champions League football can't be earned. We saw that with David Moyes. We saw it with Louis van Gaal. The change was made when they thought Champions League football was impossible. That's when they made the change. So when you look at the Donny Van De Beeks situation, just very briefly, I want to just add to what James said. United's 2 main competitions this season, you would say on paper, are the Premier League and the Champions League. Donny Van De Beek has made more starts for the Netherlands this season, 2 starts, than he has for Manchester United in both those competitions, which to me just showcases how out of favour, for whatever reason, he's been so far. I know Solskjaer said that he needs time to settle, he needs time to bed in, but James has alluded to it. He's a quality player. He's played at a high level, and I hate to have to say it. Donny Van De Beek's played at a higher level in the Champions League than Manchester United have for many years. He played in the Champions League semi-finals. Manchester United have not been in the semi-finals for a long time. So I think that's the thing that frustrates me with that situation. James talks about the need for a more experienced manager. I can understand the calls for that. I can understand the calls from a certain element to replace Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But crucially, Keane, who comes in? Because Mauricio Pochettino is mentioned an awful lot. He's been out of work for a long time now since he left Tottenham. Nobody's taken him yet. He may not have had many offers because obviously the bigger clubs haven't necessarily changed managers, Barcelona aside, Juventus aside as well. But I would question that and say, particularly in the example of Juventus, why would Juventus go and take Andrea Pirlo when he was given the under-23s job a week previously and not give it to Pochettino? That makes me question something. He seems like a manager that would want the United job. I think there will be managers that do. But you're talking about the out-of-work guys. You're talking about Pochettino. You're talking about Allegri. His English isn't particularly strong, or so we had heard. The last time he was heavily linked, he may have improved, and I'm sure he has since then. And as James will tell you, football is football, and you can get away with the basic football terms and then speed up the process of learning the languages as you go, as James had to do when he moved to the Netherlands himself. But you're talking about out-of-work managers, Keane, because there's no way on earth the Glazer family and Ed Woodward are going to be going to to Leipzig. I know obviously United just beat them 5-0 and pay money for Nagelsmann. There's no way United are going to go and try and prize a manager away from a club that requires compensation. So the way I see it is United won't make a change until they think Champions League football isn't going to happen. And crucially as well, as much as the board and Ed Woodward get criticism, are they willing to sacrifice Solskjaer 6 games into a Premier League season? Surely that would put the spotlight on them rather than Ole.
Yeah, like when you put it into perspective like that, there's obviously, like, I suppose the spotlight in terms of Ed Woodward and the Glazers is always going to be on. Like, it's always going to be there. I think Ed Woodward is probably the most talked about chief executive in world football. I think we can all agree on that. Like, the cameras are always on him. He's always a topic of conversation when it comes to Manchester United in terms of the direction of the club that's being taken. I just suppose, from my point of view, for me, I don't think Ollie's the man to bring us back to winning trophies. I don't think he's that man long term that's going to go on and bring us back to winning trophies. I don't think that's going to happen. But
Christian though, Keane, Pochettino's never won a trophy.
People say that, but you look at the success he had with a team with Tottenham when he spent no money. You're telling me that he got to a Champions League final with Harry Winks playing midfield. Like, do you know what I mean? That's a testament to his qualities as a manager. You like Harry Winks and Moussa Sissoko as sitting midfielders playing in the Champions League and getting to a Champions League final. Like, they're bang, like, no disrespect to Tottenham, but they're bang average midfielders. They are. Let's face it, they're not going to tear up.
I can understand what you're saying. My only worry for Pochettino and Manchester United fans is, in terms of his career, he's always the bridesmaid and never the bride when it comes to winning trophies. Can he change that at Manchester United? Yes, he potentially could. But are you thinking, Keane, that the team he's walking into at Manchester United's better than the Tottenham team he had at his peak? I don't think it is. I mean, on paper, I would say the current Tottenham team's better than the current Manchester United team as we stand. So arguably he'd be coming in and it would be another rebuilding process. That being said, I think you would get more out of Fernandes and some of the other players. So I could be wrong with that, of course, and only time and results would show that. But I worry, Keane. But sorry, I'll let you continue. But as I say, I just worry about Pochettino slightly.
Yeah, like the one thing I would say about Maurizio Pochettino, I think he'd get, as you said, he'd get more out of Bruno Fernandes. I think he'd get the more out. Well, I think I won't even talk about Paul Pogba because he's a sour subject. We would talk about him in a while. But Bruno Fernandes, I think for me, he gets a lot out of Bruno. I think he betters the team overall. I think style of play wise, but you have to look at this logically. I think no matter who comes into this club, whether it's Pochettino, Allegri, Nagelsmann, whoever it is, under his current ownership, are we going to win another league title? And that's a very big question, because under his current model, they seem to be content with just getting Champions League football. And again, after they get that, there's no kind of furthering. There's no progress after that. They don't try to reach the next level. And unfortunately, that's the model where we're stuck at the moment. James, in terms... Sorry, yeah?
I just wanted to suggest to you both, do you not think the answer's a little bit closer to home?
Who are you thinking?
Go on, Jim.
I'll give you a clue. Cantona. Give you a clue. Cantona.
Marcelo Bielsa.
That's
Big shout, Jim. Big shout.
Do you not think that this man, when he arrived at Leeds, they were in a similar position than to Manchester United? Not in terms of languishing, and not in, obviously Leeds' his remit was to get back to the Premier League. But this is a man who, in the space of 30 months, has changed that club and made the likes of Calvin Phillips, who people said he was a League Two player, he's made him into an international player. It's an amazing story, which I still think is underreported, because I don't think many of the British press have the actual balls to dig down and ask him questions that he will understand, or go above and beyond themselves to get the translator to translate questions that are quite difficult to answer, which will require Bielsa to think. You know, this man is a truly world-class manager. And one of the things I've learned about speaking to managers for the last 4 years in particular, every manager, whether you are, regardless of level, every manager wants to go to the highest possible level they can. And in the case of Bielsa, you know, managing Marseille, they're the biggest club in France. So it's, you know, to go to the biggest club in England. And I believe he has a 1-year rolling contract, is what I believe. And I think if Manchester United just had a little bit of guile, because the Leeds story is by nowhere near finished. People think the Leeds story is finished. It's nowhere near finished. And I think a truly world-class manager like that, because people judge it on trophies alone. You got to look at the whole aspect of football management. You look at players like Bamford, completely written off. Now, a Premier League player doesn't look out of place. The same with Calvin Phillips, doesn't look out of place. Championship players and now Premier League players, they don't look out of place. Why? Because they have a manager who teaches them, and they learn, and they want to go to the ends of the earth. They want to go to the ends of the earth for him. Manchester United used to do that under Alex Ferguson. I've spoken to enough players who played under Ferguson who said that you never wanted to let him down. Never when you played for the club did you ever want to let him down. And I think the answer for Manchester United is a little bit closer to home. And I think if they had a little bit of guile and a little bit of bottle, perhaps, I know it would upset Leeds United fans, but I'm sure Marcelo Bielsa would think about it. I mean, he's very happy, very content, but if Manchester United come calling, of course he'll have to think about it. But that's just my suggestion in such a case.
Well, it's an interesting one, James, and there's a question coming in from Grant Campbell on YouTube. Grant hosts the ever-impressive Campbell's Footballs. What do you guys think of someone like Diego Simeone potentially taking over at Manchester United? Personally, I'm not in the Pochettino camp. Grant, I'm just going to give you a wee quick answer to that before I give it over to Keane. Is Simeone Mourinho Mark II? Is Simeone not a man who will build a defensive structure and something that won't get the best out of the creative players that Manchester United have at their disposal? I don't quite know. I'm going to hand that one to Keane.
For me, as much as I love Diego Simeone and as much as I love how he has Atletico Madrid drilled in Europe, and it's always kind of refreshing to see how they do in the big games against Barcelona and Real Madrid, I would say no, because again, I don't know if I could go through another defensive manager considering the array of attacking talent we have in that respect. Again, maybe defensively, look, he do a great job, and he probably would tighten us up at the back, which we probably do need that in that respect. But no, I don't think I'd take him. For me, Pochettino is the man to come in. I think just what he's done over the course of time when he was at Spurs in that period of time, and even Southampton as well. That isn't talked about enough either in terms of the form he developed with Southampton too. He done a fantastic job there too. I think if you bring him to the next level with United, and he gets financial backing, I think he's someone who will most definitely flourish as Manchester United manager. But let's get this straight. There might be another manager in about a year, 18 months time, if Ollie's still in the job, that might become available in that space of time who we might be talking about then. Like if Pochettino, I'll put it to you guys. Let's say Ollie stays in the job for this season and he gets back he's still manager for the full season and the board give him the full time this season. What if Man City don't win the league this year and don't win the Champions League and Pep Guardiola parts ways? Do you maybe see Man City going in for Pochettino then? Because that could be a situation that could arise.
It'll be interesting to see what Manchester City do. In terms of where Manchester City go next, that will be a fascinating one. I'm gonna just throw it out there. If Arsenal finish outside the top four, will they go back for Arteta?
I don't think they'll come for Arteta at the end of this season. Potentially at the end of next. But that's just my personal opinion. And I think as well with Simeone, I think he shot himself in the foot when he said that he was going to leave Atletico Madrid, only to renege on his decision and stay at the club. I think they lost a little bit of their power. I think they lost a little bit of their aura. I mean, he's still a very good manager, but I just think that I think he shot himself in the foot with that, in all honesty. But going back to what I just said a moment ago, who was the one that encouraged Simeone to become a manager? That's right, Marcelo Bielsa. So these are players that played under the man and under their own mentality, under their own ways of seeing football. They are the ones he's encouraged them to go on to be managers. And I think with Simeone, I think when he won the Europa League in 2018, I think that would have been the ideal opportunity for him to move on past his new. And also having played for Inter Milan and having played for Lazio, I think his next destination will probably be Italy in that respect.
Yeah, lads, I've just had to relocate here, so that's why I just that's the movement. Don't mind me. Continue.
No, that's fine. I was just saying that I think in hindsight is a wonderful thing, but I think Simeone could have potentially parted ways with Atletico after the Europa League final win in 2018. And I think if you ask me where he'll end up next, I think he could well become potential new manager of Inter Milan or even Lazio, a club that he played for there. And he's a very good manager, but I think it'll be a while before we see him in the Premier League.
I think you're right with that, James. I think the language barrier is something with Simeone that is something that would be interesting to see. Would he want to come to England? Would he want to put his legacy on the line? Because whatever you think of him and his style, he's been an incredible manager at Atletico Madrid. Again, just missed out on winning the Champions League, but with the teams that he lost to, there's definitely no disgrace in that for me. And I'd be interested to see how it goes. I mean, Red Devil Talk getting involved to say keep it down, Keane. But it'll be interesting because at the end of the day, United need to, in my opinion, had to in the summer back Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to the hilt. He wanted Jadon Sancho. That was his chief target. Now, personally, I would say I think he should have targeted a centre-back. But again, that's a personal preference. He didn't get his top target. They rushed around on deadline day, adding player after player, which we've seen before. We saw it under Louis van Gaal when Falcao and others arrived on deadline day and it didn't work out. And I think you're seeing the poor recruitment strategy played out in each game, and I think United definitely need to improve, and hopefully they can over the course of the season, but I wouldn't be confident. Moving on, James, I want to come to you on Arsenal because you are an Arsenal fan, as well as producing great interviews for Football CFB and others. You are a massive Arsenal fan. Where do you think Arsenal will go this season? Because I know you question the club under Stan Kroenke's ownership. Yeah. It's similar to Manchester United. You've got an owner who lives out with the UK, an owner who doesn't necessarily invest great deals of money, it's safe to say, into the squad. How do you see Arsenal going this season? You've got the Mesut Ozil situation. You've got Arteta, of course, wanting to prove himself as an Arsenal manager. Won the FA Cup, of course. Do you see things going up from here, or do you think there could be tough days ahead still?
I still think there's tough days ahead. I think Arsenal fans, I see a huge similarity in how they got too carried away and too attached to Unai Emery, only to drop him like a bad habit when we needed him most. They would eulogise him speaking English in his first press conference. They would make fun of him watching Peaky Blinders, saying, my G, my manager. And then when Unai Emery needed us, we dropped him like a bad habit. I didn't, but obviously I was aware of what he'd done before at Sevilla and Valencia and Almeria as well, which people forget, getting them promoted to La Liga for the first time in 24 years. And I think that people, Arsenal fans at the minute, we're just too polarised. For example, you've got Mesut Ozil tweeting about the US election. Tweeting about the US election on his timeline. So Arsenal will have a cheerleader that gets paid in excess of £350,000 a week, who's not included in any squads. You would like to think that Arsenal have learnt their lesson, but I don't think they have. I don't think there's half as much scrutiny in terms of the wages paid out for Partey, Willian, Aubameyang, all going forward in terms of the wage bill, coupled that with Ozil, and also the neglecting of youth. Yes, Saka got his opportunity under Ljungberg. Saka is doing very well. But we also have like Daniel Ballard, who's already been capped by Northern Ireland. Okay, they don't have the biggest pool of players to choose from, but he's already played Nations League football. And now he's on loan at Blackpool, with the greatest respect. Gabriel had a good game yesterday, but if you look at the player history, Gabriel before Lille played for Troyes and played for Dynamo Zagreb. But all of a sudden, it's good enough for Arsenal. I think it takes a long time for the fan base to come away from the fact that we've got a whole generation of fans, particularly at Arsenal, that judge a player on his price tag rather than his previous. And you know yourself, Callum, when speaking to professional players and managers, we've spoken to players where a transfer has broken their career and literally made their career. And everything comes down to timing. Everything comes down to timing. I just think Arsenal is just a little bit, we had someone in charge for a long, long time who literally ran the club from top to bottom and allowed things to stagnate. We then have a successor coming in who only gets 18 months. And I just think my prediction at the start of the season was that Arsenal would finish 7th, and our best chance to win a trophy is the League Cup. And I expect us to make more progress in the Europa League. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But the fact remains, it's only a year. I think it's a year in December that Arteta will have 1 year experience managing one of the biggest clubs in England. You think of the Premier League in his next upcoming fixtures, he's up against Marcelo Bielsa, he's up against Nuno Espirito Santo, he's up against Jose Mourinho, managers with a lot more experience. And I go back to my last game before COVID, at home to Sheffield United back in January. We were winning 1-0, things looked okay. Chris Wilder made 3 subs, and Arteta had no answer. And Chris Wilder started out at All Threatened Town and has built himself all the way up to a Premier League level. Yes, he's struggling at the minute, and I can't believe that people are questioning his future with Sheffield United. And if you ask me what's wrong, I wonder if the pressure to buy and to invest kind of got to him a little bit, because his teams in the past, such as Oxford, Northampton and Sheffield United, they was very much a nucleus, very much 11 men and a whole squad fighting for the cause. I mean, I remember what Richard Stearman said to me the season before they got promoted. And he said to me, he'd never known anyone to stand in front of a group of players and motivate them to the best of his ability. And I just think he's got a little bit, not caught up, but I think things have just kind of, with the investment of players and the expectation to buy. And I actually think that's come from board level. And obviously they're not doing very well at the minute, but I cannot believe that his future is being questioned in that respect.
And like James, in that regard, like just reflecting back on obviously yesterday's game against like between Manchester United and Arsenal, just before I suppose we fully reflect on that, just shout out to Willie Morgan, former Manchester United player, absolute legend. He features regularly on Football CFB. Thanks for your comment, Willie. It says, great to see Callum and James on your show. They make a great team. Yeah, like both of you guys, you do a fantastic job with CFB. So it is well recognized. So again, like it's great to see that myself and Callum are now working together on this new show. And Devil's Advocate and James, you yourself, like you do fantastic work with
Thank
CFB
you.
as well. And yourself. So it's always good to be in good company here this evening, especially Joe. I suppose we're in another lockdown period, and it is a tough time for everybody at the moment. With regards to obviously yesterday's game between Manchester United and Arsenal, James, I'm just going to come to you first. Like, how would you assess yesterday's game in terms of, I suppose, Ole, in terms of Mikel Arteta, like in terms of tactics wise? Like, do you think Arteta schooled Ole yesterday?
I wouldn't say. I think schooled would go a little bit too far. I think he did better.
Yeah.
I think he did better in terms of game management, in terms of the team being proactive, looking to create chances. But I think schooled. I'm not sure. I would say schooled. But also going back to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as well, managing Mulder and managing Cardiff and then managing Manchester United, it is quite a strange journey. You know, as I say, I mean, I'm looking from an outside point of view. I'm an Arsenal fan, but I've always respected Manchester United. You know, the biggest club in England. They're not a charity. You know, you think of the managers they had with Ferguson, for example, and the great dynasty that the man created, and the standards that he upheld, and the way that everyone got behind that. And I just think that, you know, there's better managers out there, and you've got to run the club to the best of your ability. But as Callum says, we have the same with Kroenke, where in an Arsenal point of view, we are not and we will never be his priority. And until those things change, until he actually wants to show an interest in the day-to-day running of the football club, it won't change. Putting his hand in his pocket for Partey is fine, but that's just one transfer. I'd rather have someone who's a lot more proactive. I mean, in my formative years as an Arsenal fan, we had David Dean, we had Danny Fisman, we had Ken Fryer. They were not only Peter Hillwood, of course, they weren't only competent businessmen, but they were also Arsenal fans. And every decision they took was in the best interest of Arsenal Football Club. And in a minute, we kind of have the opposite, where our owner sees us as a cash cow. Yes, we have our moments, but we haven't won the league for 16 years. And if you're brutally honest, it'll be at least another 5 before we're in with a shout. So I know that Arsenal have gone from 1953 to 1971 without winning the title, to 1971 to 1989 without winning the title. But in the modern age, after 2004, you would have never have said it'll be at least in this, as we're speaking now today, 16 years later, that you're not in with a title chance. So it takes a lot of time with the building, but yeah, a lot of profligacy in that respect, and still a long way back, in my opinion.
And Callum, like yesterday, like in terms of this game, like in terms of Paul Pogba, like obviously he was a player who has come under a lot of scrutiny since yesterday. You know, he obviously ultimately made the foul for the penalty kick that Arsenal were awarded by the referee yesterday. And his overall performance kind of left a lot to be desired. Like, do you maybe think Paul Pogba, like he's recently just talked about, talking about a move to Real Madrid as his dream? Do you maybe think at the moment on current form he's playing his way out of a move in terms of his current form?
Well, a comment's just came up there from Beyond the Pitch, and the founder of Beyond the Pitch, Phil Brown, it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Phil.
Happy birthday, Phil.
Happy birthday, Phil.
There you go. But one of the things Phil said yesterday that I have to be honest with you, pardon me, made me laugh. He tweeted after the mistake saying he dreams of playing for Real Madrid. Don't we all? And it made me laugh because on current performances, there's a pub team where I live called Royal Madrid. I think he's got more chance of playing for them than Real Madrid on current form. There's no doubt about it. He's a top class performer. You don't win the World Cup if you're an average player. He was instrumental in that France World Cup win. He was very good at Juventus. What I would say is that Juventus side was far better than the Man United side he's played in since he returned to England. But it doesn't dispute from the fact he has to produce more in the park. My problem with Pogba and Willie Morgan, who got in touch, Willie's very upfront with Pogba, and he always says when you're 3-0 up, he's the best player in the park. When you're 1-0 down, you may as well take him off and put on someone else. And at times I used to disagree with Willie. I used to try and stick up for Paul, but I'm finding myself agreeing with Willie more and more as the weeks go on, because although undoubtedly he's an exceptional footballer, he is a player who, when the chips are down, is he who you want marauding that midfield and trying to dictate things in the middle of the park. Unfortunately, throughout his time at Manchester United, I would say no. Knowing Paul and the ability he's got, he'll go to Real Madrid or he'll go elsewhere and he'll light it up, and we'll all be left here scratching our heads in a year or two's time thinking, why on earth didn't we see that player at Manchester United? Unfortunately, I just don't think United and Paul Pogba is a good fit. I don't mean that in terms of commercially or the things he does off the park, because he's entitled to do those things. And for me, I think he is an incredibly talented player, but I think United and Paul need to move on from one another. Next summer will be the key for that. I'm just seeing a question come in there from Jamie Mackie Murphy regarding Pogba. Is it harder to offload him now than keep him? Yes, Jamie, it probably is. But at the same time, there will be teams who want Pogba because they know if you can put him in a team with arguably better players around him, especially in that midfield area, he could flourish. But at the same time, it will be harder to offload him, I would say, for the price United want. I think there will always be a market for Paul Pogba, but I don't think United will be making a big profit of 60 million that they thought they would. I mean, they wanted 150 million pounds by all accounts. They certainly won't be getting that.
You won't be getting that now. Like you look at this, Paul Pogba is like, I don't see a way back for him now in this current form. I think there's too much speculation there now. There's so much pressure on him now, especially like Donny Van De Beek. If Ollie decides to play him, if Donny Van De Beek shows his quality, I think Paul Pogba could be in trouble. You have Bruno Fernandes there, who, let's face it, in the last couple of games, like, look, he hasn't had his best performances, but one thing I will say is that he still contributes to the team. Even when Bruno might drop a 6 out of 10 performance, he still scores a goal, still makes an assist, or he always contributes to the team. What I say about Paul Pogba is when he plays well, he's unbelievable. He's probably the best player in the park, and as Willie said. But when he's bad, he's really bad. Like, he is like the worst player on the pitch, and you can see that his decision making when he's having a bad day is brutal. It's terrible, and his head just goes. And I believe, look, I think next summer is an ideal time, and to maybe part ways with Paul Pogba. Look, I think we'll have to look at it in a way like, look, the Pogba experiment is kind of it's failed. So I think we'll have to hold our hands up and say that. And I think it's a time where we have to go for more of a balanced midfield now, rather than try to rely on the brilliance of Paul Pogba that we all think we're going to get, because we've seen it in glimpses at his time at Manchester United, but we haven't seen it on a consistent basis. And I think with that being said, I think we need to offload, cut our ties to them, and hopefully next summer get someone in who can maybe give us more balance in midfield and ultimately be more consistent than Paul Pogba as he's been over kind of the last 4 years at Manchester United. I think that's ultimately what needs to happen, and that's my opinion with regards to the situation. James, with regards to non-Manchester United related talk, it's been very well documented. Like, Virgil van Dijk has got injured recently, and so there's been a lot of kind of outrage within the UK and kind of the Irish media and the Irish kind of football fan base in the whole. Like, in terms from a Dutch point of view, in terms of in Holland at the moment, how has this injury been received, and kind of is there as much outrage in Holland at the moment as there is in the UK and Ireland at the moment?
I don't think there's as much outrage. Obviously, he'll be missing in the Nations League, upcoming Nations League games, and but injury is also part of football. There has been reports where Van Dijk said himself when speaking to the Dutch media that injuries are part of football, and he's been quite lucky to have never sustained a really bad injury. So I think they're just kind of like wish him a speedy recovery. And they'll try to get past it the best they can in terms of the squad selection. I think De Boer will enjoy seeing what else he has at his disposal. They don't want to be too over reliant on particularly Van Dijk. Obviously, his partnership with Matthijs de Ligt was something that was really, really blossoming. If I can just quickly touch on Pogba and give my opinion, I think it's very naive of him to think that you can plan a career, because you can't plan a career. You might have ambitions and you might have wishes, but you can't plan a career. And Real Madrid are the biggest club in the world, and they're not going to be entirely convinced by what they've seen. I'm not just talking about on the pitch, but also the attitude of a player, the application of a player. And he did do very well in the World Cup for France, but France's World Cup success stems from Didier Deschamps. Didier Deschamps is an amazing manager. I mean, even before at club level, Juventus had hit rock bottom, and he brought them all the way back up. He got Monaco to a Champions League final in 2004. He won the league with Marseille. He's literally, for every French player, the ideal manager you can have. And when you've got him giving you advice, and you kind of got them on a strict leash kind of thing, coupled with leaders such as Hugo Lloris and Kante and Griezmann as well, you can see how many smiles there were in that camp. Because everybody was so happy. Even Thauvin was written off by Newcastle fans. Tauvin's an excellent player, still playing very well for Marseille. And I just think there's a difference in man management, really. But I just think that I think the naivety of him to think that you can plan a career, I think he's in for a shock. Because who's to say that Real Madrid will come in for him? Real Madrid, you see with the young loan players that they've loaned out to different Spanish clubs, they've done that for a reason, and that's for them to hopefully come back better players. And also being the capital club of Madrid, it's always important to have, as they say, the quarry translates into the cantera, means like the quarry of players at your disposal. And I just think it's very naive from Pogba, and I think he's in for a little bit of a shock next summer, in all honesty.
I would say with Paul Pogba, I think that the experiment is over. It really is. And as you said, you can't plan a career. And if he's looking for this move to Real Madrid, well, look, he better put his socks up and play well the Manchester United shirt before he can even think of getting a move to Real Madrid. Like, I suppose his only probably saving grace for this Real Madrid move is that there's the Euros next summer. I think that is only kind of saving grace for this move, that if he goes off to the Euros of France and manages to have a handful of good performances and potentially leads France to a European Championship, then yes, he'll probably get his move. But if he stinks out the European Championship as he's been stinking out Old Trafford recently, there's not a hope in God's green earth that he's going to get a move to Real Madrid. I think Real Madrid will look elsewhere. And there is other midfielders in Europe, who can do a similar job to Paul Pogba on current form at the moment. Callum, we got a question in there from the SPFL 42 show. Does Callum think any current SPFL players could play in the Premier League?
I think when you look at John McGinn and Andrew Robertson, you've got two examples of players who've came from Scotland, Virgil van Dijk as well, who've come down from Scotland and done really well. Stuart Armstrong at Southampton's another. In terms of current players within the league who I think could play in the Premier League, Callum McGregor of Celtic has to go in there. Callum McGregor's technically a very gifted midfielder. People listening to this, Grant Campbell's been tuning in, will probably agree we've not really seen the best of Callum in a Scotland shirt. But he's a very good player. At James's club Arsenal, of course, they've Kieran Tierney, who's a really good player. In terms of current players, as I say, Callum McGregor's one. I think you'll see Ryan Christie in the Premier League next season, also at Celtic. Alfredo Morelos is a player who I think will definitely arrive in a different league next season. Whether that's the Premier League or abroad, I don't know. There's a couple of young players I want to mention. Lewis Ferguson, the nephew of Barry Ferguson, the great Rangers captain. He's at Aberdeen, a very good player. I think he might lack a wee bit of pace for the Premier League, if I'm honest, but technically he's absolutely fantastic, still very young. So I think he could make the grade. Another player who's actually currently in the Premier League, but he's a young player and he's probably going to be loaned out, or he has been loaned out, is Scott Banks. He's at Crystal Palace. He came down to the Premier League. I think it was Dundee United he was at, Scott. And he went on loan to Alloa Athletic last season. And he's only 19 and he got the ball. I was at Capello watching Morton Alloa. Got the ball in the centre of the park. No fear at all. Take it on. 1-2s. He'll take players on. And you look at someone like Billy Gilmore, and Scott Banks has to be looking at Gilmore as someone he can look up to, even though I think he's a bit older than Gilmore, and thinking, what can I do to force my way into this Palace team, or force my way into this loan team I'm going to join, so that I can then prove that I can play at a higher level. He's definitely got the potential. So there might be some people listening to this that scoff at Scottish football. There might be some people listening that maybe have scoffed at Dutch football in the past, but as James will tell you, and as I'll tell you with Scotland, there are talented players there. There are always gems in the market. You just have to look for them. And unfortunately, in the Premier League, a lot of the time, I don't think the clubs look hard enough for the gems. They rely on players that are journeymen in many cases, and I think they need to be more creative with their scouting.
Yeah, like even you brought up Premier League clubs in terms of scouting. Like you look at United, for example, they don't often dip into the foreign market in recent times. It's all about getting players from kind of the British Isles. I think United could have been more shrewd with the foreign market, because you look at recently we've brought in Bruno for the price tag we bought him in. We've brought Donny in from the price tag that we got him in, both relatively cheap. Like we got Bruno and Donny in for the same amount of money nearly as Paul Pogba. Do you know what I mean? Like so. You look at the European market at this moment in time, it's probably one of the best markets to dip into, in terms of valuation, in terms of like hidden gems, as though Callum has mentioned. Like James, like in terms of like obviously there's huge talent, a pool of talent in Holland, and we've seen in kind of recent years that great players have come from the Dutch league and have come from the country of Holland themselves, not only to the Premier League but to many kind of different countries, like Matheus Delifio going to Juventus and Memphis Depay coming to the Premier League, but then obviously they're rejuvenating himself, in France. So like there is definitely a huge pool of talent in Holland as well in terms of hidden gems.
Absolutely, and it's about identifying the talent. I'll give you a couple of anecdotes. Peter Bosz was the manager of Ajax, and one day he receives a phone call from Mark Overmars. And Mark Overmars said, "We've got a 16-year-old defender in our academy that I would like you to invite to first team training." And Peter Bosz said, "What, 16 years old? That can't be right." But he said, "Okay, send him through." And then he sent him through to the first team, and he saw with his own eyes how good he really was. And his career just went. I mean, I watched him since he first broke on the scene, even doing the post and pre-match translation of his press conferences. As I'm doing it, I'm thinking to myself, am I really translating the comments from a 19-year-old? Because it looks and sounds as if he's 30 in terms of the level of maturity. You see with Atalanta, Hans Harteboer. Hans Harteboer was playing for Groningen, who people now know as Arjen Robben's club. But to go from Groningen to Atalanta is no mean feat, but he doesn't look out of place. Martin de Roon had a very torrid time at Middlesbrough, but people forget he's an excellent player. And even in terms of Arsène Alkmaar took a deliberate decision to invest in their youth policy. And now they have the likes of Calvin Stengs, Darren Koopmeiners, and also Myron Bordeaux, and they're all looking to make the step up. Wout Weghorst at Wolfsburg, he's an excellent player. I wanted Arsenal to sign him because there was rumours that he'd be leaving Wolfsburg in the summer. He's a brilliant player. I mean, even you could tell even when he was playing for Heracles how good a player he actually was. And when I suggested about Arsenal signing him, again, the Arsenal fan base of, oh, he's not good enough for Arsenal. I watched him play live. I've watched him play. It's the same with Todd Cantwell and Mark Albrighton and James Ward-Prowse. These are excellent players, but unfortunately, we have I think a generation of fans at both our clubs where, unfortunately, they're looking at the price tag. They're not looking at the player. They're not looking at the player journey. Callum says about the gems in Scotland. You know, there is enough talent there. It's about having the conviction to go out and be strong enough to make decisions that might not be seen as popular. But if you look, for example, at the teams that are Leicester, for example, Timothy Castagna. I've known about Timothy Castagna since he was playing for Genk in Belgium. I've known how good a player he is. I've spoken to players that have played with him. And then he signs for Atalanta and he signs for Leicester. And all of a sudden, it's who's Timothy Castagna? He's a brilliant player. So it's all about scouting and really nipping it in the bud quite quickly. For example, here in the Netherlands, we have Calvin Stengs, of course. And he's a very pacey winger coming back from an awful knee injury at a very young age. Darren Koopmeiners, to have such a strong dead ball specialist mentality. I mean, there was an interview with him when he went away with the Dutch youth international team. And they said to him, you know, you're captain, you've got great leadership skills. You're also a very good dead ball specialist. How on earth do you get to do what you do? And he said, well, in the case of penalties, I just put the ball down, I choose my spot and I kick it as hard as I can. And he was very forthright in that respect. And nice, I've read Devil talk to mention about Ward-Prowse. I fully agree, but I've championed Ward-Prowse for Arsenal, only to be told by many Arsenal fans he's not good enough for Arsenal. So first and foremost, you have to respect people's opinion. But I think that this whole generation of looking at a price tag rather than a previous, and looking how a player, you know, develops and how he evolves and what he goes through. You know, it's very important to remember these things. It's very important to remember the journey that a player has been on. And I know that Callum and myself, we were in very privileged positions when speaking to professional players and managers, and we realised that. But also in terms of the written interviews as well, every single one that goes out, there's always the human element about it. Like, to give you an example, one of the interviews to be published this week is with Robin Buvalda, who's now playing his football in Finland for Mariehamn. He was playing for Venlo, he was playing for Nijmegen, and now he's playing in Finland. And he was saying about when he was playing in Venlo, the now manager of NAC Breda, Maurice Stein, he really took him under his wing and really helped him. And he said, if it wasn't for Molly Stone, I wouldn't be in the position I am today. So you see about the footballing journey where Venlo, Nijmegen, and now Mariehamn in Finland. You've also got the likes of Bart Strauman playing for Grenoble in France. This is a player that came through the youth academy at De Graafschap, who were, the first division team, very unlucky not to get promoted last year before the COVID outbreak. So it's very much, there's enough talent. It's just clearly about looking, detecting it, and nipping it in the bud straight away.
Callum, we just got a comment in there from Michael Clarkson. Previously, you've heard on the podcast before. He's just asked your thoughts on Christoph Adair at Celtic. I think he's well able to play in the Premiership. What do you think with regards to Michael's comment there?
I think Christopher Ajer is able to play in the Premier League. I think I would reserve judgment on whereabouts in the Premier League for Christopher Ajer, because he was a player who came through in Norway at the age of 16. He used to be an attacking midfielder. Then moulded himself into a centre-back at Celtic under Ronnie Dyla and then Brendan Rodgers. Developed well on loan at Kilmarnock. That really toughened him up and gave him a real insight into what Scottish football's like. He's a ball-playing centre-half, Keane. He's good in the ball. I spoke to the Norwegian journalist Jonas Giver recently, and he said he's very impressed by Ajer as well. But the only thing with Christopher is at times he can be a confidence player. He likes to stroll out from the back with the ball. He is a good defender, but when the chips are down, we've seen this at Celtic a few times this season, when the chips are a wee bit down, he can be prone to the odd error. But do I think he can play in the Premier League? Absolutely, I do. I think he's good enough to play in the Premier League, and he's someone who I think will do if he doesn't go to Italy. He's heavily linked with AC Milan. Paolo Maldini's already said the club want him. So I think he may go to Italy, but if not, I definitely see him in the Premier League, and certainly why not? I mean, I'm not comparing him to Virgil van Dijk. He's not as good as Van Dijk, who obviously was even ahead of him when he was at Celtic, in terms of where they both are now, if I'm comparing them in the Celtic days. But there's no reason why he can't go to the Premier League and be a success and gradually grow and improve as a player in the Premier League.
And like James, another comment has just come in there from Jamie Mackie Murphy. He says, James, how do you rate Stephen Bergwijn?
He's a player with electric pace and a good head on young shoulders. And you see about making the impact he did with Tottenham, with providing assists and scoring goals. But you wonder about his path going forward, because he will have aspirations to play for the Dutch national team. And yes, he is being used by Mourinho, and you'd hope he plays even more games. I feel a little bit old because I was there when he made his debut away to Ajax for PSV, and he was a very, very young player. But you could even tell then, physically very strong, electric pace, and a good move for him as well. I think, a good move to Tottenham. Some take the move to the Premier League and go to the highest echelons. Obviously, Tottenham, even though I'm an Arsenal fan, you have to remain professional at all times. Tottenham also signing Reguilon from Real Madrid. I think that's an amazing signing. I personally don't think that gets as much credit as it should do. A player that come through the youth setup at Real Madrid was loaned to Sevilla. I think Tottenham did very well there, and I think they're building a good nucleus, and I'm sure that Bergwijn will want to be a big part of that.
Yeah, look, I suppose he's a very young player, and he's a promising talent. Seen him when he first came in at Tottenham, though he did show signs of a very good player, and it seemed to be a very good coup for Tottenham and Mourinho. You just wonder now, will Jose, does he fancy him now? Because look, he's got Gareth Bale, and Gareth Bale was after getting on the score sheet last night, and Gareth Bale was a player that Jose wanted at Real Madrid. He made that very clear, when he signed Bale. So it'd be interesting to see kind of what happens with Bergwijn in the next kind of couple of months, because obviously, again, as you alluded to, there is a European Championships coming up, and he will want to be playing regular football in order to get himself sharp for the Euros.
Absolutely, he'll hope to be included, and obviously with Frank de Boer taking the reins now, I think the colour is kind of taken off of the positivity that was surrounding the national team due to Koeman leaving for Barcelona. But there's still a long way to go, And it'd be interesting to see what squads are picked in the run-up to the Euros, and obviously playing 4 matches here in Amsterdam. Hopefully fans will be able to attend, but we'll see as the time rolls on, and be interesting to see what happens going forward.
And Callum, I'm just going to come to you before we wrap up this evening. Now, obviously, look, I suppose just back to Manchester United. We have a game against Istanbul in the Champions League, and it looks like if we get 3 points in that game, look, we'll be through to the last 16 most likely, because usually you need about 10 points to get out of the group these days. But looking ahead to kind of everything, Callum, do you believe now coming up this weekend, like what system do we go with? Like what do you think we should go? Because Everton are a team who are on the up at the moment, and they've a few crucial players coming back into the team this week in Luca Digne and Richarlison. How do you think we should set up? Because we've tinkered around with a couple of formations recently, and they have kind of worked in certain games. The 3-5-2 worked against PSG. The Diamond worked against Leipzig. And the 4-2-3-1 worked against Newcastle. But we haven't had a settled system this season. So, like, in terms of the style of play that Everton and Ancelotti have, like, what do you believe yourself we should set up? Like in terms of formation wise, and what type of personnel would you like to see kind of get a chance this weekend?
I think, to be honest, I did say on the preview of the Arsenal game that I didn't think they should have played the Diamond at home against Arsenal, because Arsenal have got strength in the wide areas. They've got Tierney and Bellerin, who are good full backs, and they've got obviously Willian and in a wing you've got Saka. You've got players who like to go forward, and I just felt that United playing with no real width would restrict them, and ultimately it wasn't particularly successful. In terms of this weekend, I think, if I'm honest with you, Ollie's in a position where he has to show Everton respect. I think you will see a 4-2-3-1, although I think it'll be more defensively minded. I think Pogba will drop out. I think you will probably see 2 out of Matic, Fred and McTominay starting the match, with Fernandes in front as a 10, but obviously dropping into that 8 position when he has to, because quite simply put, I think Manchester United will show Everton a lot of respect. Everton obviously are coming into this game having lost at Newcastle, which is probably not the best thing that could have happened for United, because Ancelotti will want to regain that positive momentum, and I'm sure he'll fancy himself. He's at home. They've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who for me is one of the form players of the Premier League, and looking at the United centre defensive partnerships, whether it's Maguire and Lindelof, whether you put Tuanzebe in, whoever you put in there, Calvert-Lewin's in such form that he will fancy himself against any of those centre backs. You mentioned Luca Digne coming back, great crosser of the ball. That's something that will worry United. United will need to make sure they close him down in that left flank, and they have to make sure they do it consistently. That's why you might actually see someone like Daniel James come in. Now, I'm not saying I would personally start James, but you might see him come in because he's got the pace to get back, and that's something that Ollie might need, because, as I've said, Luca Digne as a player reminds me of Leighton Baines, of course, the great Everton fullback who recently retired. If you give him space, he'll whip a ball into the box. And with Calvert-Lewin in the form that he's in, I don't think United want to see too many balls going across the 6-yard box.
Yeah, I suppose I feel like we're probably going to go with the 3-5-2 even because of that threat. I think that could happen. I think that could actually potentially happen away from home. And I know we do have our kind of preview leading up to that game on Thursday. It'll be our first time on Devil's Advocate hosting the show. So I will be looking forward to tuning into that one. But I think it's just going to be a 3-5-2. I think that's what could happen. I think it's again like potentially he's going to be under severe pressure with if we lose this game, it potentially we could be near the relegation zone. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen over the course of the season, but that's potentially where we'd be simmering around that time. So I think Ollie will try to get a result, nick a result, and just get out of Goodison Park, with at least a point. I think it'd be a must not lose game for Ollie. Not even so much that must win. It's for him must not lose, because if he loses badly like we did previously in Goodison Park, we did have that 4-0 in Goodison Park, 18 months ago. Like, you have to look at this, and Ollie will look back to that game. He'll be thinking, I don't want another repeat of that. So I think he could go with that 3-5-2 because Everton are flying at the moment, and with the personnel he could put into that back five, he might shore it up and try and nullify the threat likes of James Rodriguez, the likes of Calvert-Lewin, Richarlison. Like he might want to nullify that threat because they are flying at the moment, and so you could see that formation come back, and I think he might do that just simply, I suppose, not even so much to save face, but just try and nick a result. I think that's what potentially could happen. I know you might disagree with me, but I think that's something that could potentially happen this weekend. In that regard, it really could potentially happen. So lads, I'm going to wrap it up there for tonight. It's been an absolutely fantastic chat here this evening with regards to all things Manchester United and Arsenal and Virgil van Dijk. Look, we are back tomorrow. So we are back tomorrow with our Istanbul preview, along as well with the whole Champions League talk on the podcast tomorrow. Not just Manchester United, but we're covering all across the board tomorrow with Champions League. So I am joined by the very good Dale O'Donnell from Stretty News tomorrow. And so he'll be joining us on the show, and we'll be doing a full Champions League preview and European kind of preview this week. So he's joined us. And again, Callum is hosting for the first time as well on Thursday as well on Devil's Advocate. He's going to be joined by a number of new faces on the show. So do tune in for that. And always as well, the London Club show is back this week as well. So we've plenty of content to roll out to you this week. So please do tune in for that. Again, Callum and James, thanks very much for coming on this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure. And look, I hope to speak to both of you again very soon. And hopefully next time we have a conversation, I know James mightn't hope this, but we hope Manchester United are after getting a couple of wins. And by next time we're all in the same room talking to each other.
It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Look forward to next time.
Thanks very much, James. And Callum, look, I'll speak to you soon. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Tune in on Thursday. All the best.
Take care. Bye-bye.